Hi, my name is Barbara Chamberlin, and I was asked to give a presentation to some of my colleagues on how to give better presentations. What I can do is tell you what I have done and some of the tricks that I use for my visuals when I give a talk. I work at the Learning Games Lab at New Mexico State University, so I give a lot of different kinds of presentations, from a research summary to more of a workshop presentation to kind of a big picture keynote idea. And I suspect you give a lot of different kinds of presentations as well. And these strategies have worked well for all types of presentations, at least they have for me. My first recommendation is to drop the outline. Your visuals that you want to share should emphasize really the key points, and then your talking does the rest. Most of the presentations we see given look something like this, and that's understandable, and it's because presentation software turns out to be really great at helping us outline talks. It helps us organize and put them in and create an outline. That's a fantastic use of the tool. Go ahead and do that. Use the tool to outline your talk, bullet it out, think of your different sections, but then realize that that outline should not be your visuals because otherwise you're just reading your outline to your audience. Make that outline for yourself, print it out. You can use it while you're giving your notes. You can even give it as a handout to your audience. But now figure out a way to make good visuals to go with that talk. While you're doing that, just use less text. I try to limit myself to less than 15 words per slide. I will break that rule on occasion if I have something that really has to have some text in it, but most of my slides have fewer than 15 words. If you must use more text, introduce it gradually. Help the learner's eyes follow and see the important parts. A good example of that is a graph. When you have a graph on screen, it's a lot of information for your viewer to take in. Your title, the two axes, the colors, correlate that. Just introduce that a bit at a time while you're talking, and that helps your learner follow along with you. If you're not using text, which I hope you are reducing the use of, use images. My rule, again, is about every third slide, I try to put something of strong visual interest. To do that, here's your new best friend, Flickr. So Flickr is an online site where photographers can post all their images. Many of them post their images and say, yeah, sure, you can use these images if you want. To find those, go to flickr.com, do a search. Here I did a search on photographer at work. And then up at the top where it says any license, you can reorder your search by showing you all photos granted all Creative Commons use. That means you can use these images provided you follow the rules. Those rules depend on the image, but most Creative Commons give you at least the ability to use it, not for a profit, not to change it into something different, and to give credit to the photographer. Easy peasy, we can do that. Right there on the screen, it outlines what the rules are. You can click on those to learn them. It tells you the name of the photographer, and you can say, I found this on Flickr with this photographer's name, and then you just click the button and do a download. Now here is a fun trick when you're using photos, and that is to use a surprising image. It's fine to be literal and to put a picture up of exactly what you're talking about, but it can also be very powerful to use an image that makes your audience go, what? What does that image have to do with anything? Because then you get to tell them a story about how that image relates. And that can be very powerful in helping them relate and make meaning and remember what you've told them. So Richard Scarry is one of my favorite artists. Here, as a child, I remember looking at his drawings of airports before I even went to a plane and seeing the cars and the bustle and the traffic and the woman in the hat and all of those things. And to this day, still, when I am on an airplane and I look out the window at an airport, I can't help but think of Richard Scarry's drawings. That is how powerful the visual image is in your presentations. And see, I kind of used a surprising image there. So use your images, and you can see here how I gave credit to the photographer for this image. Now, rethink the bulleted list. You can really make points in a much more interesting way than just giving us a list of things you want to talk about. Here are some of the strategies I use. I will break them into multiple slides. If I'm talking about all the things we produce at our Games Lab, I'll just say, we create games, boom, and move on to the next slide. So one bullet per slide, for example. The next slide, I will often just have an image with no text on it. You provide the content when you're talking about it. There is what we learn, and there is how we learn it. Now, this could be a bullet anyplace else, but because I wanted to stop in the presentation and really let The words do their work. I do this trick where I animate them. This takes a lot of work. You have to put in each word as a separate text box and animate each separately, but you can see the impact. You don't want to do it with every text slide you have. And you'll notice I have more text here, but when I put it up like this, it makes the audience and me both stop and say, whoa, let me think about this. This trick would be very powerful with, there is no difference between the control and the intervention group in this study. Or, our state is dead last in the rankings in math learning. When you have text that is crucial, let the text do its work and give it very heavy visual attention. On occasion, I have something where I want my learners to see everything, all the content together. So here, for today's presentation, I've just animated these word bubbles coming on and coming off. But when I talk about these things, it's because I might want my learner to see what components are in content, what components are in social and emotional learning, what components have to do with process-based learning. So I'll use those word bubbles, and you'll see how I bring text in and bring it off while I'm talking. Here's another example of when I want to use a lot of text on screen and I'm breaking that 15-word rule. Here I'm talking about the power of game-based learning. So instead of a bulleted list, I use these word bubbles, these kind of speech balloons to put them on, because my desired goal here is not just to tell the learner that these things can be done, but for the learner to feel the impact of, oh wow, game-based learning really can do a lot of things. So here's an example introducing that text gradually, but they still get the impact of everything it can do. I will use these, I call them line bullets, to just correlate an image to some text that's important. Here is where I might in a presentation talking about the importance of young kids learning how to use technology because they have to integrate it into their lives. So as you're rethinking that bulleted list, here are some 5 examples of, you notice not a bulleted list among them, but very creative and different ways to share that information with your audience. This is just a good rule for life, just generally speaking, pick 2 fonts and stick with them. This is some of the best design advice when you're doing a poster or a newsletter. In general, you're going to pick a serif font, something that has those little feet on them, and a sans serif, something that is not. Those 2 fonts will get you everywhere. Now remember, each of those fonts has a family of bold or regular or italic. Some of them even have more variations there. This gives you plenty to play with in terms of giving emphasis, but limit your choices to 2 fonts and use judiciously, and then pick a look and stick with it. I go with the black background and white text. You come up with your own thing. But here I have pulled 4 slides from 4 different talks. But notice how they all look like they go together? This has been the greatest savings for me because my slides take me a while to put together. And every time I give a new talk, I can go pull slides from previous talks and edit or adapt and change them, and my new talk all still looks beautiful. So a text where I might have animated a lot of text in, I can copy that from an older presentation, put it into a new presentation, and change the words, but the animations are still in place. This has helped me tremendously in having consistent, beautiful talks that can be put together more quickly. Remember this slide I had at the beginning where I talked about the Learning Games Lab? I have this slide in the beginning of all my talks. This slide is branded for New Mexico State University, so you know where I'm from. But if New Mexico State University ever changes their brand or gets rid of that graphic design, I can change it on 1 slide. Here I've put into context for my whole talk who I am, and it's just 1 slide I copy and paste. Then I can go back to my black background, white text ways. I use the same strategy when I'm speaking at a conference that has graphics or visual or a slide deck they would like me to use. That's fine. Games for Change gave us a template they wanted to use. I put in the information, took a picture of it, put that as the first slide in my talk, and then all the other slides followed my similar look. When you're talking with your audience, asking questions is a powerful way to keep them engaged. I used to think it was so that it could help me as a presenter change what I wanted to say, but that's not really the point, because really I kind of know what I'm going to say going into a talk anyway. What asking questions does is it causes your audience to think and reflect and get their mind ready to be more receptive to what you're going to say. So for example, my boss and I gave a presentation on creating a more caring management style. And to do that, we started and broke everyone into 2s and asked them to introduce themselves to their partner with this question: what brings you pain and what brings you joy? And then just pick one thing you learned about your partner to introduce them to the group. This turned out to be so wonderful because in reflecting on either deep things, struggles with cancer or the loss of a family member, or work-based things, I'm joyful when I'm recognized for something I do well. First off, each person had an instant bond with their partner because they had revealed these deep, meaningful things with that person. But secondly, every person in the room then had made a connection between emotions and other people, which put everybody in the perfect mindset to hear about better management strategies in a caring way. Here's another thing I'll use. This was from that same presentation. I will hand out a piece of paper like this where I ask someone to respond in writing. And again, I don't collect these. We don't hang them up. They don't read them out to the group. But something wonderful happens when you have to articulate answers to questions in writing. It causes you to really think about those answers for yourself, and it changes your readiness in listening to somebody talk. I will use this a lot if I'm talking in a large room. I'll have everybody stand up and I'll say, okay, we're going to look and see how long people have worked with extension, with the extension service. If you have just been hired, you're brand new, you're going to stand over on this side of the room. And then I take my fingers and I show all the way around the room. And I say, if you have spent your whole life, I want you over here. I'm going to count to 20, go. And then they have to kind of order themselves. First, it gets everybody up and moving, which is always a nice thing. But also it helps each person in the audience situate themselves in terms of everybody else. Oh, am I the most experienced person? Am I new? Are there a lot of people just like me? There's a lot of things that happen when you help audience members think about who they are in relation to the audience. Now, if you're talking about dealing with a specific agriculture issue in times of crisis, you're probably not going to ask them to list their greatest joy and their greatest pain, but you can ask them on average how many acres are they farming, or how long have they been in the business, or to tell a partner their biggest crisis they faced. There's a lot of ways you can help tie it to that content that make it easier for them to hear what you're going to talk about. Another fun way to do this is to put a little poll in the middle to ask a question and ask them to respond. Most people now will have some kind of a mobile device with them in your presentation. Straw poll, strawpoll.me, you just go to the website and it looks just like this. You type your question up at the top, you put your answers in at the bottom, you hit create poll, and then it puts your poll together on a website for you. You can put that into your presentation, and it gives you a URL up at the top. So I put this into the presentation. Everyone in my presentation uses whatever device they have to go to strawpoll.me/7095596. And as they answer, they can see the results updated in real time. This is a super quick and easy way to do it. You can do the same thing with Poll Everywhere, much more robust. You have to log in to do it, but you can have the slide update real time in your presentation. You can save that data. You can have people respond just by texting. There's a lot more you can do with Poll Everywhere. Again, it's not quite as easy as Straw Poll Me to get into, but both have their place. Consider using the Auto Advance feature. This really keeps your slides moving. The default in your presentation software is just to advance a slide when you click, but you can, on a slide-by-slide basis, tell it to click after 2 seconds or 5 seconds. So this from a talk I gave on the type of learning that happens in children's museums. And while I'm talking, I just set the slides to just automatically go, so I don't have to worry about it. It keeps it going along, it provides visual interest, and it's a nice way to just keep the talk moving. Now, one of my last tips is actually one of the first things you should do, which is when you are preparing your presentation, even if it's the night before, just take 10 minutes and use the question that instructional designers ask themselves, which is this: what change do I want to create for my audience? Now, this seems like a small thing, but when you shift your focus to your audience, how do I want them to be different at the end of my talk than at the beginning? Maybe you want them to know this content, that's a given, but maybe you want them to know, have some resources as to what to do when they don't have access to you anymore. Maybe you want them to realize how similar they are to other people. Maybe you want them to feel you are a valid and credible source. Maybe you want them to think you're funny. Maybe you want them to be able to solve problems. Whatever it is about this issue, think through that and then let that guide your presentation. Too often we start our presentations with, let's see, what do I want to tell them? And that keeps the presentation focused on my needs. Well, the audience wants it focused on their needs. So start with, what change do I want to create in them? And just reflecting on that for 10 minutes before you do your presentation will have a significant impact on how you deliver it. My last tip is a simple one, and it is to repeat your title slide that you have at the beginning at the end of your slide and put your contact information on that. When you start giving a presentation, you come in, you start your thing. People don't know if you're going to be any good. They don't know if they're going to want to talk to you. You could be horrible for all they know. But then after you've given a presentation and they're dutifully impressed, they'll be like, who is this person? Where are they from? How do I contact? Give them the ability to do that. I will often also put some of that information on any slide in the footer. For example, if I'm giving a talk with a really conference that's really active with Twitter, I will put my Twitter handle there. So it's very easy for people to retweet things that I say in the presentation. So with that, you can see the 10 tips for better presentations. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or if you have any recommendations on how I could improve this. Thanks.